Welcome to the Power of Design podcast, where we have inspiring conversations that explore the intersection of architecture, construction, and real estate, so we can understand the dynamics and trends that shape an exciting and powerful built environment. This is your host, Jack Osa. Welcome back to the Power of Design podcast. In today's episode, I have the pleasure to talk to a very interesting architect, visionary, leader, and businessman. His name is Giordano. Christian is the president and owner of Mancini, Duffy, an innovative architecture firm in New York City with more than 100 years of history. I was very impressed and inspired by his story and by his discipline and focus to make progress in his life and career. Working his way up from a young designer to project manager and business owner, Christian exemplifies the power of design to approach marketing, leadership, operations, and innovation in his architecture practice today. This is my conversation with Christian. Hey Christian, welcome to the Power of Design podcast. How are you today?
I'm excellent. Thank you so much for having me, Jack.
Good, man. I'm excited to have another architect. In my podcast, I have a lot of different people within our industry, but not many architects. So I'm looking forward to our conversation.
Yeah, me too.
Cool. So, Christian, you are the president of a successful architecture firm in New York City with more than 100 years of history. What would you say is the most important skill a leader should master in order to manage complexity?
It's a very good question. I think for me, the skill that I need to or am trying to master is that of being honest with myself and being honest with those that work for us at Mancini Duffy. We have a tendency sometimes to overinflate what we do, or think of it in a maybe we see it in a different light than it might actually come across, and that might steer our business in a certain direction. But for me, it's always about being honest. What I'm really good at versus what my partners are good at versus what those that work at the company are good at. And if we're honest about that, and we really think about these. If we really think about, the way that we interact with our clients and the way that we interact with our colleagues, and we're honest about those feelings toward one another and what we're good at, I think you end up ultimately with a better place to work. And so that's really what we strive for here, is being true to ourselves.
Yeah, that's awesome. I really like your answer because, it's starting with your own relationship with yourself, right? And have it in a way that you're honest to yourself is step number one, because you cannot lead others if you don't lead yourself, right? And sometimes we have that, we even have that battle within our own mind where, sometimes we lie to ourselves and we believe our own lies. And sometimes when we do that, then it's really hard to now do the same for somebody else. We want to be honest. So what do you think it's give me an example of how are you honest with yourself?
So for instance, I think earlier on in my career, especially when I really started out as a designer, and when I was in depth in a project and I was designing it from nothing, from the concept all the way through to many times through the working drawings and seeing whatever it might be built. I was very involved in every aspect of it.
Yeah.
There were certain parts of it that I didn't like as much as others. I was never a very good technical architect. I think I'm okay, but I wasn't really super into the details and really getting into drawing all of those things. But I kind of muddled through it as I had to. And then I very much enjoyed field experience and seeing things be built and learning the lessons for sort of the connection between what you draw and then the physical reality of what is built.
Yeah.
But as time's gone on and my career has evolved into, a management position and now in the ownership position. And really as a person who, I'm almost like the head cheerleader of the firm in a sense, right? I mean, I'm the one out there trying to, along with my partners for sure, but trying to, bring in business
Sure.
and sell the things that we're good at and what makes us different here at Mancini Duffy, our technology, whatever that might be. And along the way, I have completely fallen away from the technical aspects of architecture.
Yeah.
So when I'm talking to clients and when I'm involved in meetings, I'm very quick to point out and say, listen, you've got to talk to the technical director on the project. You've got to talk to my partner, Bill. They're much more equipped to answer these questions properly to you. It's taken me a long time to admit that to
Sure.
myself
Yeah.
and to my clients. Like, hey, I'm not the right guy to answer this for you. I can comment on design. I can comment on your budget. There's many things I can really bring to the table. But on these other aspects, there are better people at this firm that are more qualified in a sense to answer those questions. And I think the more, again, it goes back to honesty. If I'm honest about that with people and really true to myself and to what we do here, it makes for a more cohesive team in the end. And clients, I think, appreciate that. You're not BSing someone.
Oh, sure. And I think that, the only way to get there is with experience. I think by nature, the younger we are, we want to prove our worth and show our value in relationship to what we do and what we know. So, we try to look like, we know what we're talking about, but, it's okay not to know everything. It's okay to say, hey, I'll get back to you. I don't know the answer, but I know who has the answer and I know where to find it, which is what at the end of the day, when you really want to communicate the right answer to the right person, it doesn't have to come from me.
Yeah.
Yeah,
exactly.
So tell me about your career. Where did you grow up? How did you start in architecture?
Sure. I grew up in New Jersey, actually about probably 15 minutes from where I currently live now with my wife and kids. I would have never expected to have gone back there, but for one reason or another, we ended up back in Middletown, New Jersey, basically. But I grew up there. I always, I think you probably, since you speak to a lot of architects like I do, architects know that moment in time when they, knew they wanted to be an architect.
Mm-hmm.
So I knew I wanted to be an architect, right? And that was just something that that I knew early on, well into high school, and I ultimately went to the University of Miami in Florida for my undergraduate in architecture. Awesome school. Elizabeth Platter Zyberg was the dean at the time, so it was a very traditional architecture school.
Yep.
Computers were a new thing. Well, the computers themselves weren't new, but CAD and 3D modeling was just about to begin when I started school. So I really started in a very traditional manner.
Yep.
Hand drawings. During that time, I worked for a local architect in Long Branch, New Jersey. This guy, Robert Adler, who does single family homes. Still has a very successful practice today in the Jersey Shore area doing these incredible, custom homes that he does. And I worked for him, and it was same thing. It was pencil drawing on Mylar. We'd have to make the blueprints and everything with the blueprint machine and the ammonia, and who knows what those chemicals were doing.
Yeah, I remember the smell.
Yeah, and then eventually I decided at some point during undergraduate, I wanted to go. I was infatuated with Frank Gehry, and the Bilbao was just about to come out, and Frank was beginning his star architecture career, I guess, or being recognized as a superstar. He was a professor at UCLA, so I went to UCLA for graduate school to ultimately have him as a professor, which was pretty cool.
Oh, cool.
And it was great, and kind of worked in the Los Angeles market for about a year, and then ultimately decided I'm really an East Coast guy and needed to come back to the New York, New Jersey area, and went to some firms in New York City.
Interesting. What do you think was a moment during your education when you felt that you discovered architecture? And I'm asking that because I feel within my own journey within architecture, starting from architecture school and kind of getting experience, I kind of, like the more you get into it, the more layers you uncover and you realize, wow, this is not only about this, there is more about it. There is more about it. Were there moments in your education when you kind of felt like, wow, this is something special?
Yeah, I would say that's a really good question. I would say probably my second semester of my freshman year, I had a professor. His name was Michael Call, with a K. Um, Very interesting guy. I haven't really connected with him probably in 20 years at this point, but um, he kind of broke the mold of the traditional architecture school that they were beginning to or that they were teaching at UM. UM was about proportion and about not necessarily classic architecture or classical architecture, but it certainly had that um, it had that leaning.
Yeah.
And Michael really, I remember we were doing a project and it was somewhere, the project site was in downtown Miami. And he was explaining to the class, we went to the site, we were looking around, and he was explaining to the class that all of the buildings that surrounded this site were decent buildings. But when you looked at the reflections of the buildings within the other buildings, to him, they made much more interesting architecture than the actual buildings,
Oh,
right?
that's
And so
nice.
this idea that you could see, sort of that interstitial space,
Yep.
right? The Noli map of Rome, right? Seeing the negative and the positive, and maybe the negative space is actually more interesting than the positive space. And for me, I remember at that moment thinking, oh wow, look at that. Like this guy looks at stuff totally differently than
Yeah.
I would have looked at it. And from that moment on, I started looking at things like, wait, let me not look at it from that perspective. Let me look at it from sort of the third person perspective, outside
Yes.
of myself. What does it look like? And from that kind of set me on this, a design path
Hmm.
specifically.
Yeah. No, that's a beautiful. I remember having similar encounters with that type of idea, and to me was when one day I realized, or I came to the conclusion that architecture is a void space, is emptiness, and what we do with the physical space is just give shape to that space.
Yeah.
But what you're really designing is that empty space for humans to perform life, and hopefully that experience is beautiful and functional at the same time. And
Yeah.
that's even applicable. We do a lot of brand design work in our firm. It's very applicable to graphic design. When you look at a page, what you're really designing is the white space in between those
Yeah.
fillings with blocks, text, and things like that. And you can, sometimes something looks really nice, and when you analyze the negative space of that is what creates the harmony and the proportions. All these design concepts are really tied together, but that invisible structure that is what we're not doing, is the result.
Yeah. Agreed
Yep.
100%.
So you go graduate, have your first experience. Tell me about your career since you kind of start as a junior architect up to the point to where you are today.
Sure. So I worked at really three firms for all intents and purposes. I worked at a firm right out of coming back from UCLA into New York City called Swanky Hayden Connell Architects,
Mm-hmm.
and I got that job because I had interned for them when I was in Miami. They had a Miami office, and there were two Richards. They called them the two Richards that owned that firm, Richard Carlson and Richard Hayden. And Richard Carlson, would come to the Miami office every now and then, and he made an offhanded comment one day about, well, if you ever return to New York, you'd be welcome at our firm, and you can have a job anytime. So I knew I was leaving California. I was graduating, and I called him and I said, hey, you remember me? You said I could have a job if I came back to New York. And I think he was pretending that he remembered me, but he made good on his promise and gave me a job. And so my first job was really Swanky Hayden Connell Architects in New York City. They're no longer in business. I think they all the partners kind of sold out along the way. But that was a pivotal firm for me because I met a lot of people at that firm that, well, one I met was my wife,
Yeah.
who became my wife. But I met a lot of people at that firm that honestly work here with me now. And then also kind of branched out to other avenues that have become clients or very good friends. So I worked there for about 5 years or so. And I went over to another firm called HLW International, which is
Hmm.
where I had spent most of my career until Mancini Duffy. And HLW is a phenomenal firm, still thriving and doing quite well. Offices all around the world. They have some incredible accounts. Like they do all of Google's work, and it was there that I really learned how to be a true designer, and in the and let's call it in the corporate sense of being a designer. So
Hmm.
not only just corporate interiors, but corporate architecture, new buildings.
Yep.
Before that, I was a junior person, so I kind of just worked on whatever was handed to me. But at HLW, I had the ability to become a senior designer. And that's where I kind of fell into my own and then began to learn how to manage people, manage a department, ultimately worked my way up through that firm to, running the New York office and things like that, also working overseas in Shanghai, China, where they had an office. And those were incredible experiences.
Hmm.
And I met a lot of clients, understood then how to interact with clients. And I really learned the most of what I know now there at HLW, and I thank them very much. I have a lot of good friends there, although we compete
Yeah.
against each other. It's always fun to beat them,
Sure.
but they certainly beat me plenty of times too. So
Yeah.
it's okay. And then I was working there. I was happy there, and one day I got a call from a mutual client that between HLW and Mancini Duffy, and this person had said to me, "Hey, maybe you're interested in coming over to talk to this person. It's a guy who's had a firm for a very long time. He's looking for a guy in his 40s to kind of come bring new life into the firm. Would you be interested in having a conversation?" And I was sort of interested. It sounded pretty cool. So I went and I met Ralph Mancini. And when I met Ralph Mancini, he was a dynamic creature. I mean, he just was, personality plus. He's. I think I've told this story before. I really envy him. He didn't have a desk in the office. He just sat wherever he felt like. He'd chat with anyone he felt like. He didn't answer emails. He just went and met with clients and just did his thing. He was Ralph.
Hmm.
He'd go to the construction site. He'd go meet with a client. He'd go sit with a designer. He kind of just did. He was a true, CEO in that respect, right? It
Right.
just didn't get involved in the weeds, and I really envy that because I feel like all I do is email all day
Sure.
long. and and so I met Ralph, and I really hit it off with him. And about 8 years ago or so, I came over to Mancini, and yeah, and here we are.
Man, that's amazing. I think that that's a nice progression because like anything in life, we usually you go to school or you learn some kind of trade or art, and you start becoming a really good technician to do those things. And there's some people that stays at that level and becomes masters of that, and there's another level when you now help other people do that, and now it's about managing people. So it's not about you or your work. Now it's about you and other people, and not only in the emotional aspect but also in the project management aspect. Develop schedules, develop deadlines, understanding how things work, what to do and when and how, and then going to the place where now you have the opportunity to now influence a whole organization from the top. So
Yeah,
that's a really good and really good journey, because I think at this point you still have a long ways to go, and have a really nice platform to take it wherever you need to go. So tell me about your role today. What's your day to day like? What kind of things do
sure.
you do? How do you create the biggest impact for your organization.
Yeah, and so I think the biggest thing in ultimately coming over to Mancini was the idea. I always kind of wanted to have my own firm, right? And it was, do I go out on my own was always the thing.
Mm-hmm.
And I was always bored with the aspect of I didn't want to start small.
Mm-hmm.
I'd worked on big projects essentially my entire career.
Yeah.
I had done plenty of freelance work for small jobs, and I knew that I wanted to do big jobs. And for me, coming over to Mancini was, well, I could continue to do the big jobs, but now I could potentially own the firm. And ultimately, that's what we was able to buy the firm out. And so, but with that has really come the responsibility of, as I say, keeping everybody employed. So my day-to-day job is bringing work in the door.
Yeah.
That really is my main thing. And
Yep.
it's about, continuing on with existing clients,
Mm-hmm.
making sure that there's certain touch points with them, that I'm responding to them, and that I'm involved in their projects. And then it's really networking and seeing where I can bring in other business. So that, it's sort of the bringing in business is certainly one aspect. The other role that I really am here is I try to be the person that steers the vision of the firm. I have a lot of lofty ideas for what we're going to do with the platform of Mancini Duffy. A lot of ideas on the technology side, a lot of ideas on the delivery side,
Mm-hmm.
and I throw a lot of them out there, and it's a testament to those that work here that kind of rein me in and figure out what of those ideas are actually actionable
Yeah.
and what we can use to help propel our firm forward and then ultimately the profession forward.
Yep.
So it's a two hat kind of thing. It's bringing in work, sort of very practical day to day revenue, top line revenue. That's what I'm concerned with.
Yeah.
But then also direction of the firm. What are we going to do next? How do we stand out from the crowd? What is it that's going to make somebody hire us over another architecture firm? Because in the end, as we always talk about here, we all do good work. All the firms like us do very good work, and
Yep.
it comes down to the people, and for us, it comes down to the process.
Sure. Yeah. So talking about bringing in work and pipe, generating a pipeline, things like that. Actually, I was having lunch with a friend today, who is he works for one of these product is a product rep for one of the industry products in the architecture world, and he's been in the business development aspect for many years, working for different companies, and now he's at a more like a national strategic account role. But we were talking about how come most industries they're very strategic, as far as they have business development people, they have sales people, like you do your best, people are operations, financial, and in the architecture world it's not common to have salespeople or business development people. Why do you think is that?
I don't know, but I'll tell you that we stink at hiring business development people.
I know.
I mean, we and me personally, I mean, I've hired several business development people that are good business development people, but for whatever reason, it just doesn't work out with us and our firm.
Wow.
I don't know why that is. I think it's because in the end, we say we're the seller doer model, right?
Sure.
So if I have a client, I'm going to be involved. I mean, I've been on calls all day today, as an example. One, we're doing a cannabis dispensary for a large cannabis client of ours. I was on with the Brooklyn Nets. We're doing a job for them. I was on earlier with a private bank that we're doing. So, and those are all clients that, I mean, for me, a lot of the Zoom stuff is amazing because I can kind of get to all these meetings where physically it's hard to do. But that's what it is. We're selling our service, but we're also selling, I'm selling me, my partners, when they're out, they're selling themselves. And I think the business development side the sales thing, that the clients almost don't want to talk to a salesperson. They
Yeah.
want to talk to the person that's going to sit down. Our clients ask us all the time, who is my main point of contact?
Yeah.
And a lot of times it's the project manager, or maybe it's the project designer, maybe it's me. And the business development side, if they're in there, it's not them, right? And so they're not interested. And listen, my wife is a salesperson for furniture
Mm-hmm.
in our industry, and she's great at that, and she does really well with that. But it's there, a product, an actual tangible product, as opposed to what we do as a service. It's a different model for some reason.
Yeah, it's interesting because I think the blessing and the curse for architects is that we love what we do. We become emotionally attached to our work, so that makes us really good at selling it because we sell it with passion. But
Yep.
at the same time, you cannot multiply or transfer that to other person you hire so they can sell with the same intensity you do.
It's true. There are some good business development people in New York and some architecture firms here, but they've, if you follow their career, they're now part of the leadership of those companies. They've become, yes, they were salespeople theoretically, but they're integrated into that company. They're either a principal or they're an owner in some respect. And so in a sense, they've sort of evolved out of just that pure sales role, and they're doing other things. They're a part of the firm.
Yeah. So, is your wife selling Knoll or Herman Miller?
No. She's an independent rep.
Okay.
So she sells Andrew World out of Spain. What else does she sell?
Yeah, and I'm asking because I think everybody has seen the news that Herman Miller bought Knoll, and we're like, wow, that's big news.
I know. One of her lines is Edelman Leather, and that's owned by Knoll. So she's curious as to what's going to happen with that.
It's going to be interesting.
Yeah. I was surprised Herman Miller buying Knoll, because I always thought of Knoll being bigger than Herman Miller. But
yeah.
I don't know.
Not the same.
Wrong.
It's a big move.
We'll be right back with more from the Power of Design podcast.
The Power of Design podcast is brought to you by OSA Studio, a multidisciplinary design firm focused on creating impactful experiences through the power of design. We partner with our clients to create buildings, interior spaces, brands, and strategies that help you deliver a successful project. As a minority-owned firm, we are committed to building a diverse platform of curious and driven design professionals so we can together pursue our full potential. For more information, please visit us at www.osastudio.com.
So, what do you think makes you really good at what you do?
Good question. I think it goes back to, the honesty is one thing. But more so, it's that I think that I'm approachable to the entire firm here. We talk about within this firm being entrepreneurial, this idea that if you have an idea, I want to hear it. I want to support it in some way. And that way, usually meaning that we'll put some money behind it to explore it. So we had someone here that wanted to chase, airport work, and we established a studio around them. That was their idea. We had never done that kind of work before, and they chipped away and ultimately established that as a studio. Our technology side here, we had a lot of ideas about what we could do with technology. And ultimately, some people came here and really said, I'm ready to take this over on the technology side. And we'd like to hire programmers and developers, and we'd like to develop some software for our own internal use. And then maybe it's something that we could sell down the road. And that's what we did. And it really is about saying, okay, that's a good idea. How can I support you in that? Whether that's financially, or we're just going to sit down and figure out a business plan to it. But it's that ability to say, yes, we're architects, but we also can do so much more, because I truly do believe that. I believe that architects can do a tremendous amount. We kind of hold ourselves back in a sense.
Mm-hmm.
We touch so many different professions, and we learn so much about how people work and what they do in their companies, that there's so many good ideas out there, and there's so many good ideas just even at our own firm. And it's really opening yourself up to say, what are your ideas and how can we help you?
Yeah, no, that's a really good quality, and I think one is to be open-minded, just to consider opportunities, and the other one is that I think you believe in the power of design, and I think that's one of the things that I'm very passionate about, and that's why I call this podcast "The Power of Design," because I think um, traditionally architects and maybe other design professions, they don't realize that the fact that you have the ability to design, you understand the design process, is a huge tool that could be applicable to pretty much any problem in any industry. And
Yeah.
what for us is very common in a way to solve problems, if you overlay that on a problem in another industry, that's very innovative, and you might be bringing simplification and new ways to see things. But it takes an open mind to say, yep, okay, let's go somewhere else, bring what I have, and see what's going to happen. So you can test the ideas. Maybe it doesn't work the first time, but as long as you're open minded and you start trying, at some point you're going to start seeing the results of that approach.
Yeah, and I think people are starting to, you hear this more and more about design thinking.
Mm-hmm.
I see it in my kids' school, right? That they want to have one of their missions now, as they kind of, change their curriculum a little bit. One of them is design thinking.
That's awesome.
So no, that's interesting, right?
Oh, yeah.
I mean, that is kind of what we do in a sense. I've never really formalized it in that way. But as they begin to learn in that respect, right, and a lot of it has to do with robotics and science, but it's it's basically the same thing that we do in architectural design. We sit down and we solve a problem by coming at it from all different directions with a conceptual idea of how to make it, whether it's more beautiful or more functional, but there is a design aspect to it.
Yeah. Tell me a little bit about practicing architecture in New York, in New Jersey, where, there are huge firms, there is a big competition, there are a lot of buildings, there is a lot of history, and, I will think that's a very aggressive place to do business with.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, I can answer this in a couple different ways. There's kind of pre-pandemic and now, right? Yeah. It's a little bit different now. Although they just announced today that on July 1st, New York's going to open up 100%.
Oh, wow.
Meaning Broadway and all of those sort of things. So we'll start to see a lot more action here in New York City, which is great. The market between New York and New Jersey, and let's call it, the Long Island, Connecticut, we really are kind of all one market. And most people that work in New Jersey have worked in New York City at one point, right? And I would say pretty much everybody in our New Jersey office worked in New York, whether it's at our firm at another firm. So there's a lot of similarities between how we go about doing work. There's really no loss of knowledge between the two states at all. But the New York market itself, as you said, it's very competitive. There's probably thousands of architecture firms. There's, some of the biggest in the world are here. And one of the advantages that we have at Mancini is that we're a known entity. I mean, we're a known New York City institution of architecture firms, which, for me, I say that's like starting on second or third base, right?
Yep.
I mean, we've got a head start, which is great. A lot of times we're associated with projects because we've been on them forever, or they know us, or, they say, okay, what are some of the big firms that could be included on this? And we get included. That's a dream, right? That, we just get an RFP because of our name, which
right.
is awesome.
Yep.
But then there's that competition, right? And There's a lot of competition in terms of price. If it's a corporate interiors job, we have to be very careful about how we price it, trying to figure out who's on that job. What other firms are we competing against? Because interiors in New York City is very commoditized, unfortunately.
Yeah.
So it's X amount per square foot, and if you're not within that, you're not going to make it, to the final round of being selected. The base building side of things a little bit differently. There's still sort of, let's call it, value in the fee structure. They're gonna look at the overall scale and size and people that you have on that particular job, and then make a judgment on that. And so that works out a little bit easier. We're right now, it's a race to kind of see who comes out of COVID on top, in a sense, right? There's less and less of the business development things that happen, the events, the gatherings that occur, or one-on-one meetings. So trying to find other aspects of how to make sure our name is out there, how to continue to develop relationships. And that's why I started a podcast, like you have a podcast, some other way of getting our message out there that continues to keep our name known in the market. And there's also a war for competition, even during the pandemic. You'd be surprised. We're always looking for good people to hire at the firm, and people are always looking to take our good people too. Yeah. So, and everybody knows each other. As big as New York City is, it's a small market. We all know each other. We've all probably either gone to school with one another or worked with one another at some point. Pretty much everybody's worked at Gensler at some point in New York City. So in that respect, it can also be fun to kind of see your competitors out and about, and because it's a nice industry in the end, as sort of cutthroat as it might be. It still, to me, is a friendly industry.
Sure. What would you say is the biggest challenge your clients are facing today?
Today, it depends on the type of client. So if we were to take an interiors client, because we do 50% of our revenue or so is really corporate interiors.
Okay.
Right now, what they're struggling with is, what does return to office truly mean post-pandemic? And we're, admittedly all over the map with it. But one thing I will say, and I've talked about this with some other people, the nice thing I think to come out of the pandemic is, rather than companies following trends of, let's say, open office or hoteling or whatever these interior trends might be, I think it's a great opportunity for individual companies and the leadership in those companies to look inside their company and really try to figure out what truly works best for them. How do they work themselves? Not how does the industry work? So if you're working from home and it's really working well for you, well, maybe you do need less office space. Or if you're finding it hard to collaborate or have client meetings, or the video isn't working for you, then maybe you need more, or maybe it needs to be configured. Maybe it needs to be more of an experience center versus a heads down office space. And so our clients are all struggling with that. What does return to office look like? Is that 5 days a week? Is it 3 days a week? Is it less? Does it mean I need more office space? Does it mean I need to have the ability to have a video conference, at my desk or at a conference room or in the cafeteria, right? There's all of that. And we've got companies that think they know what they want, and they've said, okay, this is how we're doing it. We've drawn a line in the sand. This is how we're going to build the space, and we're going for it. And we have other companies that say, well, maybe we'll have enough space for everyone, and if it doesn't work out, we'll just shed those floors later on, kind of thing. So that it truly is a struggle. Nobody knows, as we come out of the pandemic, what does it really mean? I think offices are here to stay, which is good news. It's just in what capacity are they ultimately here to stay in?
Yeah, I think one of the positive byproducts of the COVID crisis has been, the acceleration of rethinking a lot of assumptions we had. And I think we intuitively knew, years ago with the technology we have, that we don't have to be at the office 100% of the time. We knew it. But now that we were forced to do it, many organizations are like, wow, this thing, we can work still and everybody's fine. And I think part of that has been, generational leadership in companies. When you have baby boomers still leading organizations, for them, they use technology, but it's hard to really fully trust technology. And just because they really need that personal touch, personally, they think, younger generations need them as well, but they don't. I have 3 kids. My oldest son is 12. I have a 9-year-old daughter. My youngest son is 4. They interact with technology all day long. They're doing virtual school all day long. They play with their friends online. They develop relationships, and that's normal to them.
Yeah. Oh, I agree. I same
That's
with
how
my
it is.
kids. I mean, they have their friends up on their phones, on their iPads, and they got friends in different chat rooms doing different things.
Yeah.
And it's insane. It's impressive sometimes.
Yeah. So I'm excited about what's gonna happen in the next 2-3 years with workplace design, because finally the decision makers are realizing that things, they don't have to be the way they used to be. And I think that notion of flexibility, I think giving people options is gonna be one of the biggest trends. It's not gonna be 100% 40 hours a week in the office. It's gonna be more, well, if you want that, you can have it, but if you want something else, we're offering like a menu of options that you can select to understand what type of work style fits better, your own performance as a person.
Yeah, and for us, we're gonna live what we preach, right? Our lease is up in our current spot in New York City, and we're close to signing a lease in another location, not too far from this particular office, basically down the street a bit. And the office itself is about the same size. It's laid out differently, but the way that we're designing it is really less heads down desks and more. We'll have plenty of seats for everybody, but they aren't going to be desks.
Mm-hmm.
We really want it to be a place, because of the culture that we've created here. It really is a family. We like to get together for lunch and dinners and drinks and stuff. And we like to have big client events, and the technology side of things is important to us. So we want to have more technology, more of our, what we call our design lab, our research and development lab, and expand that, make it bigger and better, and have a second and third one. And then we'll have plenty of seats for everyone, but we're not going to have dedicated desks. And the idea is that we're going to rotate just like we're doing now and have been for a year.
Mm-hmm.
You're going to come in and you're going to work 2 to 3 days a week in the office, and then you can work from home 2 more days a week. And I think that'll be, but if you want to come in and you don't want to sit at a desk and you want to sit in a lounge chair, just like we designed for all the companies that we do, we're actually going to do it for ourselves. And I'm excited for it, because I think I'm going to go Ralph Mancini style, and I'm not going to have a desk.
Sure. That's nice. Maybe you just need a scooter or skateboard.
That's right.
So talking about technology, what do you think is the future of the design and construction industry? And I'm talking maybe 20, 30 years in the future.
So I hope it doesn't take 20 or 30 years, but what we're really doing right now is our process. We call it the 360 process, where we bring our clients into. We've developed our own software called the Tool Belt, and really what that is a visualization software that it's a link, it's a connection that we've written between Revit and a rendering, and it's basically our own custom rendering engine. And it gives the client the ability to interact with their Revit model. So we can have a virtual meeting within the Revit model, whether that's a Zoom call kind of thing, or it's physically in our lab. You can put virtual reality goggles on and move around, and you can interact with your Revit model. And that's great. And there's some firms doing similar thing, and there's definitely software that does similar things. I like to think ours is, because we designed it, it really works for our process. Mm-hmm. And we're trying to reduce the waste in the design process. But in the end, what I always say is that no matter what, with all the technology that we have in terms of drawing, we still flatten our drawings out and print them out onto sheets of paper.
Right.
And because of whether that be, in our case, New York City, where you can't, you have to go through a certain process with the DOB, or a contractor, or legalities of things. Our goal is to deliver that Revit model. I mean, we put so much effort in that Revit model, the level of detail that's in there, everything is figured out. And then we flatten it and we print it as PDFs, and it just gets to be a big jumbled mess by the time it gets out into the construction world. And why are we doing this? Why can the car industry, and I know why, right? I get it. Everything that we do is custom.
Yeah.
Even if we do 2 of the same floors or 10 of the same floors in an office building, in the end, they're not exactly the same.
Right.
So it's not like we can spit it out of an assembly line. However, we can come pretty close if we really put some effort into it.
Right.
And so, why can Cadillac, do on-demand manufacturing and never have a single piece of paper that's generated? Why can't we do at least some aspect of that going forward? So that's really the goal for me, is to deliver the 3D model as a construction entity.
Yeah.
And with that comes, you have to change the way the construction process works as well. It can't be, people that are looking at sheets of paper. It's got to be more visual. Maybe it is a AR, VR combination. There are other ways of doing this. We're looking at projection mapping. We're looking at other ways of communicating that model without it being just a flat piece of paper. And I think there are certainly contractors out there that are very sophisticated and get it and understand that, this is the way it's going to go. But it's going to take a while. So hopefully it's not 20 or 30 years, but it's at least 10 years before we deliver the 3D model.
Yeah, because as you said, like, we have all the pieces.
Yeah.
They're here. It's just a matter of how do you put them together, and there is something close. And not only the design and construction aspect, but also permitting. Because they, at some point, there's liability involved. They need to somehow approve what you're showing. So I know here locally in Charlotte, North Carolina, about 5 years ago, they started a pilot program where you can get a permit through your BIM model.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. So as long as you engage, they have a virtual design and construction team in the county. So they get involved very early on in the project. And, the project needs to meet certain criteria. But you develop a BIM execution plan, and you work with them throughout the process, and they will give you permit based on a BIM model.
Yeah, so I've heard that in a few other states as well, which is wonderful. New York and New Jersey are, we're a little antiquated when it comes to that. We finally just got the Department of Buildings online only a couple of years ago.
Oh my gosh.
It takes, it's a lot to move a mountain.
I know. Well, how does the power of design impact who you are and what you do?
Well, design is in everything that we do, and all of the technology and all of the great people and all of the the wonderful parts of Mancini, Duffy, and everything that we've accomplished over the 100-year history, and then over my tenure here over the last 8 years, it really all, to me, does come down to design. Because if we're not doing great design and we're not elevating our client's experience, whether that's an office building that we're building from the ground up, or an office workplace that they're occupying, or a residential thing, or even down to in some of the less glamorous work that we do, the industrial, and distribution centers, there is power in design in those things. There's efficiencies there. There are things that, may not fit the world of design from the beautification point of view, but they're certainly design from the functionality side of things. And all of that, if we don't have good design and forward-thinking design, then we're really not doing our job as architects and designers. It really, then anyone can do this job. It's just kind of, you might as well just hire the contractor and skip us.
Yeah.
If we're not going to take it to the next level. And so design is really something that, in the end, as I said, no matter what all of these other things that we do really well, if we're not doing design first and it isn't the first thing that we're focused on, then all of the rest just falls flat.
Yeah. Well, Christian, thank you so much for your time. I really appreciate the conversation. I'm really inspired and energized by your story and what you're doing. And I look forward to staying in touch.
Thanks so much, Jack. I really appreciate it. Time flies. It was a great conversation.
Awesome. Thank you, man.
Thank you.
Bye. Thank you for listening to the Power of Design podcast. Remember to rate and review on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or wherever you listen. Find out more about Jack and Osa Studio at osastudio.com and follow us on Instagram at the Power of Design podcast. Thank you.